Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. My name is Bryan C.P. Steele, and I will be your nerd today and every day that you watch my channel. So it's been a good week. We always like to, if you follow the channel, you know this is the way we roll. If you're new and this is a random click that you've linked to or whatnot, we try to start pretty much every episode with kind of the week in Bryan, the life of Bryan. Just what I've been working on, what's been keeping me busy, what's been putting a smile on my face. You will probably note that for the people who watch this a lot, the lighting in the room is a little weird. My hair is super flat because I am recording really late on my recording day. I got caught up with work stuff this afternoon, and I had a very good friend of mine stop by the studio that I wasn't expecting and brought me a present for the Aquaman shrine. If I lean and show you just a little bit, if you follow my finger next to Captain Happy Skull here, if I can work out how this works. So right, like, tip my finger, this little green doohickey, this little necklace that's hanging off of my Aquaman trident. My good friend swung by and brought me that. That is a replica of the jade pendant that Arthur wears in Aquaman. So I have one of those. It's awesome. But he swung by and he got to hang out. We hadn't hung out in a while, so I spent probably far too long out of my workday talking to my friend, and just we talked movies, we talked games, it's awesome. In fact, actually, eventually I'll probably try and have him on the show. He's not a gaming industry person or anything, but he's run a game store before. He's played games of various kinds, and he's got he's got good camera sense. But I'm going to go ahead and apologize because he was here as late as he was during my workday. I was pushing the limits on when I could get this recorded on a normal time schedule, because I then had to pick my stuff up and run off to go run my first store invite Shadowrun game tonight, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a minute. But the reason why my hair is flat, I am exhausted, and it is crazy late at night, and there's no light coming in the window, so I had to use the overhead lights, which is why I've got this kind of weird overshine thing going on. Basically, the studio is not set up real well for me to record tonight, but here I am. I have no reason not to give you an awesome episode, and I do have an awesome episode set up, but I wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way and tell you that that's what's going on. If you think that hey, something's kind of weird, why is Bryan shiny and glowing from the top, and why does he look exhausted? Well, it's because it's been a long day. A good day, but a long day. Let's see, as far as the week in Bryan goes, last week I talked about some of the stuff we got for Christmas, but I did want to show you, because I do have it hooked up now, is I got my fancy keyboard, my fancy light up super awesome keyboard set up, and it is exactly that. It is fancy and I like it, and my mother-in-law rules, so she got that for me for Christmas, so thank you, mother-in-law. Let's see what else. This week, I'm waiting to hear back. I did some edits on some Dungeon in a Box stuff, and I'm getting ready to dive in on a whole new adventure for them. But I would kind of gotta wait to get a couple things lined up before that happens. But I've been really just doing a ton of painting. It's been very painting heavy. Aside from my regular duties that I have with Big Child and Crafty. but I've been doing a lot of painting in the hobby section. I got signed up some new commissions. I finally got the. I know I've been talking a lot about the Thousand Suns commission that I'm working on for a client. I got that done last week, which turned out awesome. But so now I'm kind of full steam ahead on a couple of other commissions currently, and things are looking good. One of the things because I think I've mentioned in the last hobby day we had was the all Suhagwen hobby day for this Ghosts of Saltmarsh painting commission, and so I'm working on finishing that up here in the next couple of days. But while I was unpacking these figures, there's a set of 4 really creepy looking anglerfish style Sahagwan that are supposed to be like these uber deep ones or something, like like bottom of the ocean type things. And what I did was I started playing around with them, and I wanted to make sure that they were pale, and that they didn't look like they needed to really stand out from the rest of the Sahagwan. And I got the idea of I was like I wanted to paint because they've got this little like kind of dangly light thing, like the anglerfish does, and I was like, I want to, or lanternfish or whichever one that's called, the one that's got the little glowing thing in front of their face. And I was like, I want to emulate that, and I started trying to paint it, and I started trying to figure out what color palette I wanted to use, and it dawned on me. I still have a ton of my Stuart Semple lit, my super phosphorescent pigment. And so what I ended up doing is I painted their eyes and the lantern bit a very neutral color, and then I went back and added some hard nail polish gloss to some of the Stuart Semple lit, and the results. I normally I don't like to necessarily show off commission work, because it's someone else's job to, they've paid me to do this, so it's their cool thing. But this turned out so good. I took a couple of pictures. I took a picture of them lit up, and then I took a picture of them with the lights turned off, to show the difference in what this stuff does. So here, take a look. Let's take a look at those 2 shots. How cool is that? Like, I can't get over how neat of an effect that is. It kind of sucks that it's on models that aren't mine. They're going off to a client, but either way, I'm super excited, and I showed the pictures to the client, and he was like, "That's amazing!" So I love going that little extra mile for my painting clients, because I know sometimes I make them wait longer than they should because I've got all this other work stuff that I have to accomplish, in the interim. That I'm not a 100% painter when it comes to my time. So I like to do the extra little bits and bobs here when I can. That being said, so I mentioned that tonight I had my first Shadowrun game, my first kind of professional game master sort of thing, going out to a store and running for the store. And we had a good time. 4 out of the 5 spots in the Shadowrunning team were filled. It was a good adventure. Basically, there was the Seattle Metro Zoo, which has a bunch of dangerous meta zoo out, like crazy animals, parazoology type stuff. They had a couple of escapees due to some technical difficulties, and the team had to come in and wrangle the animals without killing them. And it was a good time. They're not supposed to be very deep as far as the missions go. They're not supposed to be these huge plot driven things. But it was a good time, and I think they all had a good time. And we're still kind of getting our feet wet when it comes to the sixth world rules. So that's part of why some of these first sessions are going to be not milk run, but not necessarily too heavy handed. when it comes to danger factor, because I'm trying to learn as much as they are. But while I was setting up for the thing, the owner of the store had reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you're one of the only local professional miniature painters in our area, and I want to do something nice for my buddy who lives on the East Coast." So he bought his buddy. He bought him one of the D&D Noels' Marvelous Miniatures Beholders, which is honestly, for the price, for like the retail, I think the retail price on this is like $5-6, and that's amazing. Like that's like a racquetball sized beholder that comes on a flight stand. You know what? I'm gonna pop it open. I get to clean it up and prime it or whatever tomorrow anyway. So, but I mean, it's just an awesome kit. Comes with and it even comes with wow, this is actually really cool. I didn't know how cool this thing was. So it's got it's got its own little flight stand kind of thing. Just sort of, look, great detail. It's got a huge mouth, a good tongue, big old open slotted eye that I'll be able to spend a lot of time painting like capillaries and stuff in. That'll be a ton of fun. But several of the eye stalks are separate. Like they are pieces that I can pull off, because this monster, if I can get that back in there, if not, you may have just volunteered to be the first to be the first one that gets replaced. It comes with a little bag of eye stalks shooting, like actively shooting the rays that come out of the beholder. It's got a little base that it sits on, which is fine. But it comes with 1, 2, 3. This one looks like it goes over the eye. Oh my gosh, it does. It's a glossy lens for the eye. So after I paint it, I can pop that in. Oh, see, that's gnarly. That's cool. I didn't even know that was there. That's pretty awesome. So if I want to make the eye milky almost, I can. But it comes with these like eye stalks that have the beams or different various lasers of energy. Like this is obviously a beam currently being shot out of whichever head stalk that is, and they're different. Like the one looks like a lightning bolt, one looks like a fiery thing. Yeah, see, that's cool. I don't think I want to do all of them. That might be a little crazy, but I could probably do 2 and still have it look pretty gnarly and like a neat overall effect. I don't know about the eyeball lens. We'll see how I feel about that, but because I feel like the eyeball itself looks really cool, but it is kind of big and exposed. We'll see. I'm sitting here like, ooh, nah, but I just wanted to show you guys that's like this really gnarly kit that the store owner purchased and is having me paint for his friend out on the East Coast. Basically, the way that he put it is he wants it to look really cool to sit, either to use it during the game or to just basically sit in front of his game screen and terrify his players that there could be a beholder coming at any moment. And that's awesome. But I also think that if I do a good enough job, which I know I will, that maybe that store owner will give me a little bit more work, more painting work, because I know he has a couple of those really big kits that if you don't show somebody how cool they are, they sit on the shelf and they gather dust. But yeah, so that's cool. So I picked that up. Picked up another painting commission from one of my Shadowrun players. So I've got a lot of painting to do in the next couple of weeks. That I'm excited for. I always enjoy my painting commissions. They pay, they not only do they pay the bills, but it also it helps sate my desire to paint some of these models, so it keeps me from going out and buying random beholders and stuff that I may or may not use with my own D&D games just because I want to paint the kit. So that's cool. It's gnarly. I'm glad that I've got that stuff lined up and headed this way. Let's see, what else before we get into the topic of the day. I think that was pretty much it. I mean, I hate to be like, this was a boring week in the week of Bryan, but not a lot going on. I was getting over being sick, doing a lot of painting, doing a lot of writing. Well, I did talk to one of my buddies who I've signed up with to do some short story work. So that'll be fun. I had a brainstorm idea for a scene that I think that will be a cool addition to a short story. I don't know whether or not it'll be something that I want to build an entire story around or use as part of another story. But I think that if I don't get this scene out of my head and out on a paper, I will probably I'll explode. I'll just explode. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff headed this way. I know this isn't something I normally go into, but I did finish watching The Witcher on Netflix and the Mandalorian on Disney Plus this last week. Both were awesome. They're amazing shows. It is such a good time to be a geek or a nerd or a dork or whatever your chosen nomenclature is. There's so much good sci-fi and fantasy out there. They're spoon feeding it to us, and it's awesome. It's hard to not, as a creative, it is hard not to be inspired by these, by seeing these shows and all that. So, yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps up the week in Bryan. Aside from, I do want to take one brief moment. I got nose itches. Sorry, I got to take one brief moment, and I'll make sure to put the link back up in the description. I do want to go ahead and shout out to it's not anonymous because I get to see on my end where it came from. But I want to leave them anonymous because they didn't want to be recognized publicly anyway. But someone had recently donated a small amount, not anything huge by any stretch of the imagination, but they had donated to my wife's GoFundMe medical account. And I just wanted to, anytime that happens, I always want to take a second and thank you guys who, pitch forward and help out where you can. And I know in this day and age, and especially in America, where our healthcare system is just so out of whack, there's a lot of people in my industry that kind of almost, I don't want to say rely on GoFundMe, but we have kind of created our own version of assisted healthcare through our fan bases and the people who buy our stuff and the people who want us to be able to keep buying and keep creating stuff. So thank you, donor. You know who you are. And anyone who wants to be a donor or wants to help out, the link is in the description for this video, or if you follow me on Facebook, I post it up every once in a while. Again, I don't want to dwell on, I don't want to dwell on the negative. That's not what this is about. But I did want to go ahead and say thank you for the donor, or thank you to the donor, and thank you to potential donors. You really don't know how much that stuff means to artists that are trying to make it work. So thank you. All right, so let's move on to brilliant other topics. Like, for instance, if you clicked on this link and you didn't just do it blindly, or you didn't just follow your subscription, which you should be a subscriber, the you followed it and you didn't notice the title, but today's title is DM tips. It's one of the DM tip videos, specifically about hiding the rails. And this is brought to you today by Armor Class 10's amazing t-shirt, the Dungeon Master t-shirt, that's done in that kind of puppeteering Godfather style. The Dungeon Master's making everyone dance to his strings. There's always, I know when I was trying to describe what a Dungeon Master did to my, that sounded weird. When I tried to describe what a Dungeon Master did to my children, when I tried to describe to my children what a Dungeon Master does, much better. One of the things that I said is that the Dungeon Master is the part of the story that is everyone else. And the response that I got from one of my kids was, "Oh, he's like a god." And it's like, no, there are gods, but he isn't a god. He's even better than a god. He's the guy who writes God's script. He's he's the narrator beyond the narrator. He's the guy who tells the narrator what to say. And it occurred to me that, with a few exceptions, generally speaking, being a Dungeon Master means you do know everything that's going on. You're supposed to know all the stuff moving behind the curtain, have things planned out, know what you're gonna do, and you're not just a clerk for rolling dice. You aren't just a roll d20, tell you what it happens. You're there to help tell the story, to help shape the story, and more than anything, you are the representative of the rule base. You are of the narrative. The strength of your narrative is going to depend a lot on the Dungeon Master, or Game Master in the case of certain games, or Storyteller if you're playing like a Vampire the Masquerade or something like that. But whoever's in charge of the game, they are the one, unless you are running the kind of game that your players just get to do whatever they want and go wherever they want, and you'll just sort of roll random encounters and make things happen. Unless that's the case, your plot structure and your narrative is what's going to be important. And I know that there is a certain element out there. There's certain players that will use the term railroading, and they'll use the term extremely more often than not. If someone's telling you that they're in a railroad game, that their DM just railroads them from place to place, and what that means is it's being put in it. Unless they just really enjoy not making any decisions, it puts them in a negative connotation that basically says that no matter what the players do, you're going to get from point A to point B, from point B to point C, from point C to point D, that you're going to push them along these rails, that you're going to make them do and go all the places that you want them to in your narrative. And I think that some of that comes from a lot of the old school style, like old TSR D&D modules, because a lot of those old D&D modules were like, all right, read this paragraph, the players need to do this. If they do anything else, refer back to point A, get them somehow to come back and do this. And it's very easy as a game master, when you're writing out your plot, when you're trying to figure out what your game's going to do, for you to fall into that kind of railroad style player character neon sign here, doot, 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 that some players might be okay with, but I would assume that most players would like the freedom of thought, the freedom of action, to be able to go and do what they want to a certain degree, to within the scope of the rules, but also, they don't want to feel like all of their decisions that they're making, all of the conversations they're having, all the players all the NPCs that they're meeting and monsters that they're thwarting, they want they want that to matter and not just be, oh, well, this is something that happens before the next time that we stop on my plot structure. And I think when a game master railroads their party completely, just basically says, all right, I'm taking you from point A to point B. I don't care what happens between those two things. We are getting from point A to point B, and that's how it is. I think part of what that is that's a game master telling their party that your decisions, your plots, your directions that you want to go matter less to me than the story that I've written. Hang on one second. This lemonade is awesome. So what you're doing is you're basically telling your players that, you can come up with some cool ideas, but they're just going to be filler compared to what I'm putting together. And I think I have always thought that that's the wrong way to do things. I know in earlier episodes I've said, I won't tell someone they're doing something wrong if everybody's having a good time, and that's true. If your game master is like the conductor of Thomas the Tank Engine and is railroading you from everywhere, from breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, but you're having a good time and it's not bothering you, then who am I to say that it's wrong? I'm nobody. I just feel that most of the time, players will have more fun within the narrative if they think that they have a say in it, if they think that they've got something going on, if they can adjust the story as they go. I think it's one of the beauties of Matt Forbeck's EverQuest books, or like the old school Choose Your Own Adventure books, is that's exactly why we read those, is that we were the ones that were making the decisions. We were the ones that was adjusting the outcome and making sure that everything got taken care of the way that it's supposed to. That was we made those calls. And yeah, of course, if you read the wrong thing or went to the wrong page or made the wrong decision, that you and your party are dead, go back to the beginning and start over. There's always that aspect to it. But I think that's even when you turn to a page and it's like, you're dead, you feel better knowing as the reader, I made that choice. I chose to run at the Yeti screaming and he ate me. Instead of a game master telling you, this is what's happening. You ran at the Yeti and got eaten. I think if you make that call, it stings less. And that maybe that's just me. But so what today is about, and what our sponsored T-shirt, the Dungeon Master String Puller shirt, what this is all about is being a game master, being a dungeon master, and creating your narrative in a way that, although you are still ushering your characters from place to place to place as you want them to be within your narrative, you're making it feel and seem more like their decisions have brought them there. That they have choices to get to the different plot points in your story. And I collectively call that hiding the rails. Is that the rails are still there. You're still moving the party along in the way that you want. It might be a little more of an obtuse drive, but you're still getting them to the plot points that you want, to the major NPCs that you want. You're getting them to these different places, but in ways that the players are the ones that are steering, and they don't ever know that they are being railroaded at all. It doesn't feel that way. And that's what today is about. That's what today's episode is about, is basically here's a handful of ways that I know I have in the past set up my narrative. I recently got an email, or it was a Facebook message, some kind of electronic communique from someone who was about ready to run their very first D&D game ever, And one of the things that they were terrified of is they were like, what happens if my players don't do what I want them to do? And I think, especially for new game masters, new people running their games, that is a very valid fear. That you could sit down with a bunch of players, especially if they've been playing longer than you have, or maybe you're at a convention and those guys, it's a group of people that they've played together forever. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. They could sit at that table, and when you hit the go button for, okay, let's get this going, they go, you know what, it doesn't matter. We're going to do our own story instead. And I think that the difference between a good DM, I'm going to use the term DM, but I mean game master, storyteller. I mean anybody who's running a game. I think the difference between a good DM and a great DM is someone who can, without flinching, take the strangest scenario, the weirdest things that players will sometimes do, and roll with it as if it was part of a you had put down your roadmap of different things that could happen, and this was a possibility. You had the theory. You did your Doctor Strange moment. 4,365,902 ways that I've seen this end, and only one involves a MacGuffin. There's a way to make that happen. And I think the biggest thing, and this is I'm revealing my hand, that when I run a game and when I write a narrative, I will write like an outline, bullet points. Here's a place, everything under A, here are all the people and the different various kind of plot lines that could happen in A. And then down the way, here's B, here's a couple of people, here's a couple of plot lines that could happen in B. And do that 4 or 5 times, but I don't get too far ahead of myself, because you never know where the players are going to take you. I might know that I want my players to go from place A and around place C have this major event happen to them. Well, let's say we're playing, they get close to place C, and someone decides that something's fishy and they're not gonna go. They're gonna go to this neutral oasis, this caravan. They're gonna do something else completely and leave the city that you've got this big thing planned in. But like, we can circumvent it. Well, let's just not go there. We'll go to this other place instead. And as a game master, that can be very infuriating. I have all of this stuff planned for Hawktown, and you just completely bypassed it. It can be frustrating, but unless you've written yourself into a corner, there is nothing that says that all of the cool stuff that was supposed to happen in Hawktown couldn't happen in the next big city that the characters happen to go into. All you have to do is basically change a few terminologies here and there, update the monsters, if that's update the encounters for difficulty level, if that's something that the game needs, and then basically pull up that information and put it someplace else. There are certain things that might be a little more specific. Like if your big bad guy is this giant red dragon that you've said early on lives in a volcano, well then yeah, probably, unless your players decide to completely leave and be like, we're never going to the volcano because we don't want to deal with a red dragon, then what you do is, you bring you bring the volcano to them. You bring the dragon to them, or you have you figure out, well, I need to get them in front of this dragon eventually, so you have one of his crazy half-dragon mage apprentice guys lead a small force to come find you. You can build on anything as long as you know the major points. If you build too much of the minutia, take that same story. The giant dragon lives in a volcano. The players have decided that they are never going towards that volcano ever. So what you do is you send the Dragon Man squad to go get them, to go pick them up, and so you send them and they get there, but the issue is that they still don't want to get into the volcano. They still don't want, they fight off the bad guys. They're like, there's nothing you can do. You could always try and bring the dragon to them. If you, a lot harder, makes a lot less sense, and could be devastating from a rules standpoint if you've mentioned how big this guy is. He might be way out of the player character's league, and the whole reason you were having them come to him is because you had this big earthquake planned that was going to seal him up in the caldera, and the players can get away and be like, we know his evil plan, we got to thwart this before he gets free. There's all these reasons that you could have things happen that might be, it's going to be a little harder to have your caldera collapse in on him if the dragon's not there. Don't be too specific. Instead of saying the mountain collapses on the dragon, you just say the dragon gets in your little bullet points. You just say the dragon gets incapacitated. But not through combat. You like little note, the player characters don't get to chop this guy up. Something bad happens, and he is struck down for X number of months or whatever, to give the players a sense of urgency. Oh, we got to get out of here before that dude frees himself or wakes back up or heals or whatever. The best way that I have found to kind of keep your player characters on target, but without just being like, oh, this is where you have to go, is always give them options. And if you write your encounters that they can fit in most of these options, then it really doesn't matter where they go. They might not be going to this town that you've created to house your big encounter C. They're going to go to this town that you have made notes on how to make it hold big encounter C. Or over here, you've made notes of how to make it fit encounter number C. It doesn't mean that what's happening is happening at all of these places all at once. That there is suddenly 3 ogres that are all doing the same thing at these different places because of your encounter being at all of them. What you're doing is you are making it so this event, this ogre encounter or whatever, you're making sure that it's going to take place no matter which direction that they go. And should they backtrack and go to another one of those other places, make sure that you've got some kind of cool backup, that it's not just, at any one of these 3 places the ogre thing happens. Because sometimes players can be super, super thorough. And it could be they show up, they fight the ogre, they win, yay! And instead of moving on to the next part of the narrative, they double back and go, well, let's go check out those villages. There could be other problems. There could be other people that need to be saved. There could be more ogres in the wind. And if you don't have something lined up for these other villages or these other places to kind of help show that this whole area was designed for the ogre fight, is that you are either going to just sort of put your player characters in a box because they go to these places and it's like nothing happens because you guys already killed the ogre and the ogre was going to be here. Have a secondary thing that a little note you've written down that was like, if the ogre's not going to be here at this location, that maybe it's overrun with goblins. He sent his emissaries forward and it's just crawling, just lousy with goblins. Maybe you put it in there that either the ogre is here, or this particular village is gearing up for the next time the ogre stops by. Maybe they're completely distrusting of all outsiders, or they need somebody to give them a hand making the spear, the spear blockades, the pickets, and things like that. There's ways to make it not feel like this was your only option. And unless your players are the kind of players that can separate the fact that you've got this narrative that you're trying to make happen, that you can tell them, after the session's over, when they've ventured, they've already gotten on the boat and they're heading to the next continent or whatever, and one of them looks at you and goes, so what happens if we would have went to one of the other cities? You might share. You can be like, you know what? You go to this one, and the villagers are gearing up for battle. And they might very well be like, oh man, that would have been cool. That would have been awesome. But you are basically telling them that their story, the story that they are telling, the story that they're helping being a part of, is outlined, it's cohesive, but it is also able to be affected by their actions, by where they go, where they choose to be. These events aren't happening in a vacuum. And I think that's one of the biggest things that early dungeon masters have a hard time with, is not just being like, okay, we're playing this book adventure. This book adventure we're going to this village, and at the top of this village there is this keep, and nothing else in the world matters. There is no, there's no connective tissue aside from these two things. And because of your dice, that at some point you're going to be using some lightning magic, or whatever. You don't want your undone or uncooked adventure, so to speak. You don't want it to feel like you're force feeding it to the players, that this is the way that it has to be, or there's fire outside of the pathway. In a fantasy game, there's a lot that we can do that will make sense, even though the nature aspect behind it, or the timing, because the stories don't match up quite right. There's all that kind of stuff that can go wrong. But I think that as long as you don't set all of your information and all of your places and all of your people and all of your encounters, as long as you don't set those in ink, in stone, then there's all kinds of malleability. There's all kinds of ways for you to entertain and play with your players without basically turning every single place into part of your story, and every single place is part of your you guys are following the great servant of the Red Dragon, and every single city that you go in, well, he's been there too, and you just missed him. That can get old and cliche really fast, especially depending on the players. It can actually tick some of them off, that they may not want to feel like they're just being pushed around from place to place if they can't get anything done on their own. And that's including, dealing with mid-range bad guys, dealing with the sub-bosses of the game. If they feel that they are just being pushed to the next fight, or moved to the next encounter, or we decided to travel over land using our horses and ponies instead of taking the river, and as a DM you still say, okay, well, the trip is uneventful because you wanted a riverboat encounter, or you wanted this trip to only take 3 days, and your players decided to turn it into this big long overland journey, then you've got to learn to roll with it. Now, That's not to say that you can't remind your players that sometimes time is of the essence, or sometimes there might be a prophecy that talks about something specific. That you got to remind your players that, yeah, you don't want everything to be a cookie cutter trope, or you don't want everything to be, as it is in every single story. But you also don't necessarily want your story to be 100% unique and no one's ever thought about this before. Because that will probably come back to haunt you as you pen yourself into a corner where none of the regular game rules apply, or one of your players might be very well versed in the greater world that you're playing in, and he says, well, what about this? And you're like, oh, I guess I wasn't thinking about that because I was thinking about my plot point. Because your plot points are important as a DM, because you are the story. You are who is pushing forward this story, helping your players shape the script as they go. But the actual plot line itself, this is your baby. And it's up to you to make sure that it doesn't kind of run away, it doesn't get away from you. And that's, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that can happen, is either a player or a dungeon master comes to the realization that my players are really not paying any attention to the idea of a family burial, or the idea of this kind of heap of corpses in the corner. They haven't really thought about that. They're just like, yay, victory, yay, loot, yay, encounters succeed. And as a dungeon master, you should remind them that there's more to it than that. There's more to it than just beating the boss. There is, where do we go from there? Where does the next leg of our journey take us? You want to inspire your players to want to know or do more. And one of the best ways to do that, I hate to say it, is lie to them. I know that sounds terrible, but basically feed them misinformation. This NPC tells them about this place down on the end of the road that's got this big crazy awesomeness. They get down there, and it was your way of tying in a couple of new NPCs to help start this other story. And the player's like, no way, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. I'm checking for secrets and whatnot. That you can't. If you wanted to, you could feed them a couple of secret rooms or a compartment or whatever. But at the end of the day, what you've done is you found a way to reinvigorate a bad guy, turn him into something that the players might want to actually get at, and also sort of reveal that maybe he or she is not quite as super well connected or well armed or well trained or something. Gives you an opportunity to give some insight on the bad guy too. I say bad guy, but you know what I meant. The antagonist. The way, in my opinion, the way to avoid a downright railroad. And now I'm going to pause, because I do believe that railroads, that style, has a place. There are definitely instances in Gaming Chronicles where the players might be like, all right, well, I guess we'll just hold up here for the night. And it's your job as a game master to remind them, well, less than 30 feet away, you can hear a pack of hobgoblins having dinner. This is happening. Maybe you aren't ready to take a nap because those guys are right around the corner. You have to be able to take control of the situation, but you also need to be able to take a step back, let those players do what they do, describe what they describe, and if at all possible, incorporate it into your greater message, your plot line, the best thing you can do, the best, like, out of my favorite sort of writer narrative uh, award, mental kudos, whatever you want to call it, is when another writer or another designer comes up and basically says, I loved your story. I loved what you did. I loved the flow. I would have loved to play in that game. That's a huge, that's a big leg up. It's a cool thing to say to somebody who is also a creative. But the drawback is that as writers, as creatives, as the people who are running the show from behind the game master screen, it would be real easy for us to fall into that sort of drony, okay, roll your dice to hit, roll some soak, roll your dice to hit, roll some soak, or digging out the back way, or whatever. There's these there's ways for you to include the monotonous in your greater plot and make it part of your story, make it part of what you want it to be, without straight up telling your players, oh man, you guys totally missed my ogre, so I guess he's gonna have to show up here. Don't tell them. This is the lying to your players part. Don't tell them that they threw a monkey wrench in your works, or if they did and you want them to feel good because they did something, off the cuff and weird, and it totally, oh man, it threw me off because I'm normally so well prepared. That's fine. Let them know that, but also let them know that you're not going to let it phase you. You're going to be able to push forward. You're going to make this adventure work. Or, maybe the players, next time they get to the next big city, someone talks about how that ogre razed that village to the ground. Oh man, we were going to go to that place, weren't we? Yeah, we did, but we chose not to. Oh, all those poor people. There's ways to try and remind the player characters that the ends do justify the means, but the means are also half the fun. Is doing all of these side missions, doing all this stuff on the way there. Because if it was just, all right, guess we got to thwart the bad guy. Grab your stuff. Let's go thwarting. Especially in a game like D&D where the power level would be drastically different. That's a no-no. Is you don't want to just throw your player characters at the boss because that's the next step. Well, it said, I looked at my outline and it said the next place is they get to fight the boss for the first time. Man, that lich is going to rip them to pieces. That's not going to be any fun for your players. There's nothing to, like, I have always enjoyed in a narrative battle, especially in like video games and stuff, where you get into a battle and nothing you can do. You're fighting hard, you're doing your best, but something is telling you that this is just, it's futile, and you are just barely trying to wait until the keyboard lights back up and starts telling you, you may now swing freely. You are now in Adventure Arc 2, start punching stuff, or whatever is going on. It's not going to change on you, but it's also, you don't want it to be where, okay, I'm punching the crap out of things, I'm beating the crap out of things, that's great, but because I ran straight to Snake Mountain, I'm fighting King Hiss, and I'm only level 3. Quick anecdote, the Square Enix games, the Final Fantasy games, I used to love them, thought they were the best games ever. And then I played one, I want to say it was Final Fantasy X. And I got myself to a point where I followed the narrative. I followed what the NPCs were telling me to do. The world is falling apart. This domed city is falling apart. You have to go. You've got to go save we just saw the bad guy. He ran out that door over there. Go get him. And I busted my ass playing that game, just pushing my dudes down the road. What's the next clue? Push down the, where's the next clue? Okay, cool, there. Is he going to be at this place? Well, it says he's going to be. And you just push, 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 push. And then I get to the point where I'm like, all right, standing in front of the big bad guy's throne. All right, I made it out of the city before it collapsed. My buddy, the dragon dog, is still kicking, and he hasn't died from the poison you gave him 6 months ago. Let's do this. And then he just proceeded to murder me because I narratively pushed my way through that story, fought against stuff as I could, but I never stopped and just ground. I never just ground out a bunch of experience, cash in my dudes, fight a bunch of guys, cash in my dudes, fight a bunch of guys. I didn't do that. And when a game makes it that's that sort of uphill grind, that sort of, oh, you have to use cheat sheets, or you have to use the guide to tell you where all the special magic items are and all the secret keywords to use them. When you got to do all of that just to make it fit your own narrative because you put the boss in the middle of this narrative fight and didn't warn the players, didn't warn me about me and my party members that we're going to get boned, but also made it so it was impossible for us to even like shoo him away, you're set in a situation where that's going to be no fun real fast. And that's exactly what happened to me with these Final Fantasy games, is that I hate the idea that for you to be able to do some things, you have to have a cheat code or a cheat book that tells you, oh, no, you have to walk up this mountain 36 times, do a pirouette, and come back down with an axe in one hand and a candy cane in the other, and bam, you get the plus 20 Santa suit. No one would find that. No one's going to figure that out. They're not just going to randomly determine, oh, yeah, this is, I'm sure this is probably how it works. They're going to need a cheat code. They're going to need a book. They're going to need somebody who saw it on the internet to do this thing and some stuff. And what that's going to do is that's just basically going to cause more bosses to need to be created tougher, more grinding that's going to need to be able to happen, more following these books and being like, okay, I need to go get this item at this time to do this thing. And in a role-playing game, which these Final Fantasy games are supposed to be role-playing games, in a traditional role-playing game, you are going to have a hard time telling the DM or getting the DM to reset things. Let's grind a few more levels. Let's go kill 1,000 goblins before we go fight the bad guy. Because that's not going to be realistic. That if you've built this cool narrative world as a game master, if you've built your cool narrative world and you've pushed your players through it too fast, you've railroaded them, from place to place to place to place to encounter, and you get to this final thing, and they haven't experienced enough, they haven't gotten enough loot, they haven't grown to a high enough level that this is a challenge and not just, death on a stick, that you need to know how to slow your own game down, how to put in side plots that won't completely ruin the main plot or send the characters on such a drastic left turn that it no longer even feels like your story because we're over here doing this thing. You have to figure out the best ways to incorporate your story and get it to fall in suit wherever you can make it happen with the actions of the players. And if your players are the kinds of players who are like, hey, let's talk to the NPCs and figure out what we got to do next, then that's kind of easy. You can sort of seed the conversation if that's what you want to do. You have that ability. And the only reason you have that ability is because you have set yourself up with all of these individual bullet points that can happen here or here or here. You've made your list of, here's your hierarchy of monsters. In this particular gaming arc, it goes goblins to hobgoblins to orcs to gnolls to dragon men. And depending on where in their career or where in how hard I want this individual encounter to be, I can pick from that list and build the encounter from there and insert it kind of along the path, as long as they didn't completely throw caution to the wind and be like, let's go into the mountain tunnels. And even then, you can figure out good ways of dealing things. You just may have to take a quick break, take a bathroom break, look at your monster manual, figure out where you want to go, look at your notes, look at the other bullet points. Maybe some of the things that they've passed might be a good fit to make it happen now. So it feels good at this particular junction. But at the end of the day, what you want your player characters to do is fall in line with your story, but use their own words to tell it. Their words and actions are the ones that are shaping what's happening. You are merely making sure that it gets massaged into the right overall narrative arc. And that can be tricky sometimes, but overall, your goal is simple. Your goal is to make sure that everybody has a good time and that your story gets told as cohesively as possible and without being just a complete jackknife to what the players are doing. You want everything to kind of mesh together as well as possible. You want your player characters to think that that they are in control, but that they are still abiding by the overall plot. Very few players will want to simply, their goal is to, let's completely screw with the game master. Let's not do anything that he says. That's not going to happen very often in most games. Most of the time, they want to see what you've got planned next. They want to see the next big boss. They want to meet the NPC that might show them how to do this, that, or the other thing. They may, you put an airship in your game, a dirigible. They're going to want to find out who's piloting it. As long as you've got these things in your bullet points, in your schematic for the overall adventure, and you know how they fit in, even if it is just a superfluous piece. It is just, it is a piece for Joker Schmo number 1. It's a piece for him to follow into this total side plot. As long as you know that and make it part of your story, you're doing it right. You're making your game flow smoothly, your narrative flow smoothly, and your players, you're keeping them happy because they feel like they have a lot of power and decisions and choice in what's going on. And that's, I think that's really it. Is one of the best ways to hide again, tying back to the title of this episode, the way for you to hide your rails is don't hide them. Just make it so the players are the ones that are choosing them. They're choosing which set of rails to go on. And as long as they eventually get back to the places that you have set up, or you've moved your places so it goes, so that it appears further down the line, they shouldn't be much to the wiser. And you can still have your cool moments. You can still have your cool scenes. You can still have the encounters that you were dying to use. And your overall narrative stays constant, stays in progress. It stays the way you wanted it built. And that is kind of the key. I personally think that that's a good way to make sure that your table is running smoothly, that your game is running smoothly. But who am I? I'm just one nerd in a sea of thousands, tens of thousands, as the case may be. I am officially getting very tired. And I looked at the clock and we're running a little bit past normal time. I am gonna hit the hay. I'm gonna get some sleep. This weekend I've got, let's see, what do I have lined up? I got, I get to play the new Dune board game for the first time. That'll be fun. Get to take a look at that. And then I've got a writers meeting later this weekend to talk to somebody about potentially another project. So I've got a lot of stuff going on this weekend, but I'm going to make sure that I get out there and make sure that I have a good time. And just like hopefully I'll get everything squared away, and I hope you get all of your stuff squared away, and I think you need to get out there, have some fun, and for the love of all that is holy, from the gods above and below, play some games. We'll see you next week.